Mr. Sean Jones, Mission Director of USAID to Ethiopia, thank you for having you.
Thank you.
US Embassy recently issued a statement rejecting any accusation that USAID has been diverting aid to the TPLF fighters. I wonder if you tell me what triggered you to issue that statement.
Thank you for the question. Every time we're presented with an opportunity to share a little bit about our program, it helps us to clarify why we're here, why the United States is investing so much money, time, and love and passion into Ethiopia to benefit our Ethiopian brothers and sisters. Of course, the United States government was very concerned about the recent, I think, misrepresentations and inaccurate reporting across some of the state-run media channels about USAID information, about USAID assistance in the country. We wanted to make sure that the Ethiopians got other sides of the story, that they heard directly from us that in no sense and in no history of humanitarian assistance here in Ethiopia has USAID ever provided any kind of food or drugs or any other kind of assistance to TPLF or to armed groups in Ethiopia.
So if USAID did not allow them to access aid, how could the TPLF fighters get your aid?
Sure. So I think that's a great opportunity to clarify. And unfortunately, you know, in a time of war and conflict, there are ways that armed groups get food and non-food items from humanitarian actors, of course. We took this allegation very, very seriously. So we know that we have not delivered any high-energy biscuits in the Tigray region since February of 2021. But as a result, then we started thinking to ourselves, how did these TPLF soldiers get access to USAID food and maybe even non-food somewhere? Well, unfortunately, I actually can't tell you how that happened. But I will tell you, in conflict zones, I think there are probably three ways that armed groups and soldiers might get access to humanitarian supplies. First, number one, is that often food is sold to soldiers and maybe even to other citizens. And so everybody who travels around the country in Ethiopia, and you go into rural and even maybe urban local markets, you see a lot of humanitarian supplies that are actually being sold. Sometimes by people. Maybe they needed cash instead of the food that month, and so they're selling their food assistance that might have been given to them, or non-food assistance. But you see it everywhere around the country. So that's one way that it could have been. Another way is that, of course, we know that some citizens are sympathetic to, in this case, the TPLF. And maybe they gave their food to the soldiers. And then, of course, third is, I think, the worst thing that could happen is when soldiers and armed groups come in and they steal that food or non-food from citizens. And that is absolutely the worst case scenario, is when the people who are so needy and were recipients of assistance then ultimately when things are taken away from them and the food is taken right out of their children's mouths, that's when we are facing really the worst of what armed groups can do in this country. And unfortunately, we are seeing a situation in which, particularly in Amhara, right now, where the TPLF has expanded their very aggressive fight. And we know for a fact, in Amhara now, we now know that the TPLF has, every town that they've gone into, they've looted the warehouses, they've looted trucks, they have caused a great deal of destruction in all the villages they've visited. And it's a great concern for humanitarians. Humanitarians have fled for their lives, again, throughout the 9 months of the conflict, throughout Afar, Tigray, Amhara. Humanitarians are the ones at the center of the conflict. They're the first ones to go in and provide life-saving assistance. And only when their lives are threatened, or when things are stolen, or when their buildings are looted or burned down, are they the ones to leave. And unfortunately, we've also seen quite a few, I think it's 15 now, of our humanitarian brothers and sisters have lost their lives in the past 9 months of conflict.
So do you believe that the TPLF fighters have been stealing aid from your organization?
I do believe that TPLF has been very opportunistic. Maybe they're stealing from citizens. We don't have proof of this, of course. What we do have proof of is that several of our warehouses have been looted and completely emptied in the areas, particularly Amhara, where the TPLF soldiers have gone into. Yes, we know that that's a fact.
The government has been voicing concern that the TPLF fighters have been stealing aid, which was supposed to be delivered to civilians, and no organization, including USAID, did say anything back then. And now you're telling me that the TPLF fighters might steal aid. Why didn't you say anything back then?
You know, months ago, when the federal forces and aligned with Eritrean forces were in Tigray, there was a lot of theft that was occurring. We came out when we had proof and when we had evidence, and we came out, and first we would speak with the government of Ethiopia. We speak with our counterparts and our colleagues in the Ethiopian government, and usually we were able to resolve a lot of those issues between governments. We now know, because of, again, new facts have arisen, that in recent weeks, some of our warehouses have been looted and emptied by advancing TPLF troops, and especially in Amhara right now. So it's not that we have disagreed in the past. It's just that the United States doesn't make comments. First of all, we don't make comments about everything. Second of all, we don't make comments based on rumor and accusations. We make comments and we call out misdeeds when we know that when we have facts that support what we want to say. And in this case, we are very confident that in recent weeks we have seen TPLF soldiers emptying some of the warehouses.
USAID in the statement indicated that it is feeding 7% of the Ethiopian people. Can you highlight the overall efforts made by your organization in the past 9 months or so?
And thank you for that. I always love to talk about the history of U.S. assistance here because, frankly, this is the largest aid program in the entire world. And it's not just because Ethiopia is going through a challenging time. It's because Ethiopia is absolutely one of our finest and most important partners anywhere in the world. And that's why we invest in Ethiopia. So, for instance, just in the past 5 years, we have invested over $4.2 billion here, some of which is humanitarian assistance, but a lot of it is development assistance. When we're working hand in hand with our government partners and the Ethiopian people in places like Somali and Benishangul Gumuz and Gambela, Oromia, Amhara, even Tigray, to make advancements for the benefit of the people here. So we have a very long-standing history in Ethiopia. And of course, we are providing a lot of humanitarian assistance. And I think what we are seeing right now is a result of the U.S. government and the American people's commitment to the Ethiopian people when the Ethiopian people need a helping hand the most. So, for instance, in places that are outside of Tigray, we are providing emergency aid to 3.5 million Ethiopians. Again, this is outside of Tigray and the northern conflict. This is in places like Benishangul Gumuz and Oromia and Somali, SNNP, where communities are still struggling with conflicts, drought, could be desert locust, floods, whatever it might be. We have been providing assistance for a long time. So that's 3.5 million people. We also are a big contributor to the government of Ethiopia-led Productive Social Safety Net program. So the PSNP, we support 1.6 million people trying to escape from poverty. And then, of course, as is most aware, because of the conflict right now, we are providing support to food support to 5 million people in the north right now. So this is, of course, inside of Tigray, but also now in Amhara and Afar. And we'll continue to support Ethiopians during their time of need.
Do you agree with the notion that the relationship between Ethiopia and the US is deteriorating?
I hate to use that word. I think there's some strain or there's some stress in our relationship right now. It's really important, I think, for the United States as a partner of Ethiopia, and we are a committed, passionate partner about our relationship with the Ethiopian people. As a partner, sometimes we have to raise our voice. Sometimes, like in a good marriage, sometimes we have to say what we're feeling at that moment. We have to provide our advice because maybe we've been through this already, and maybe we see decisions that are being made in our partner, in Ethiopia in this case, that might not be, we think, might not be in Ethiopia's best interest. And so maybe if people look at it as a deterioration of the relationship, frankly, it's a very honest conversation. I will tell you, my relationships with senior Ethiopian government officials has maybe never been better. I have honest, clear communications with my colleagues in the Ethiopian government every single day to talk about ways that we can resolve things together. Unfortunately, we're all very distracted by what's in Twitter or Facebook and what a lot of people in the social media are talking about. That is not always the truth, and I think people need to make sure they're trying to find the truth when they're listening to two sides of an argument.
Finally, the Ethiopian New Year is approaching. Take your time if you have best wish for the Ethiopian people.
Absolutely. So my family and I live in Ethiopia, and we want nothing more than for all Ethiopians to have a very prosperous future. It is in the American people's interest and the U.S. government's interest that Ethiopia be a unified, stable, and prosperous country for all of its citizens. But not just the citizens of today, the future citizens as well. USAID is an organization that's thinking about how do we help our children in the future, 20, 30, 40 years from now, how do we help them become more prosperous? And I think as we go through this new year, I would say there's two things that we need to really remember, is that when we think about the conflict, there is no benefit to anyone by continuing the kind of conflict that we see right now. As Ethiopians have taught me, when the elephants continue to fight, the grass will continue to be trampled. And I think the second point that I would call out is that this new year in Ethiopia, over 900,000 Ethiopian citizens are going to be facing famine. And some of those families are not going to survive past the new year. That is what my organization and my government and the American people are so committed to right now, is helping Ethiopians at their time of need.
Mr. Sean Jones, Mission Director of USAID to Ethiopia, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.